Witam wszystkich ponownie bardzo serdecznie na kolejnym webinarze z serii Wizja legalizacji marihuany. Dzisiejszym gościem będzie Janaki Mitrovski z Macedonii, ale zanim przejdziemy do tego, chciałabym Was wszystkich bardzo serdecznie zaprosić na zbiórkę podpisów. Jako Wolne Konopie oczywiście słyszeliście już, że zbieramy podpisy pod obywatelskim projektem ustawy potrzebujemy 100 000 podpisów poparcia. Dzisiaj o godzinie 14 spotykamy się przy Metrocentrum w Warszawie. Aktywiści Wolnych Konopi, zapraszamy wszystkich, którzy są w Warszawie, żeby przyszli, złożyli podpis. Jeśli jesteście w stanie poświęcić nam trochę czasu, zostać z nami i zbierać podpisy od osób, które przechodzą, oczywiście będziemy bardzo wdzięczni. Właśnie takiego aktywizmu od Was obecnie potrzebujemy. Ja będę tam, na pewno mnie znajdziecie. Będę już o godzinie 14. Mam przygotowane dla pierwszych kilku osób i plakietki, projekty ustaw. Będzie widać nas, będziecie wiedzieć, po czym zbieracie. Mamy oczywiście przygotowane listy poparcia i przygotowane nakładki RODO, więc niczym nie musicie się martwić, zostawiając podpis. My nie przetwarzamy tych danych, wysyłamy je bezpośrednio do siedziby, tam są jedynie przeliczone i odsyłane w wielkich pudłach do Sejmu. Więc ja zapraszam wszystkich, godzina 14 dzisiaj w Warszawie. Tymczasem zapraszam na dzisiejszy webinar. Moim gościem jest Janaki Mitrovski z Macedonii. Webinar oczywiście odbędzie się w języku angielskim. Hello, I'd like to welcome everybody on the webinar. I'd like to welcome my guest. Janaki is a lawyer from Macedonia. Just please tell us a little bit about your work and what brought you to start working in the cannabis industry.
Hello, thank you for the invitation, Natalia. I am very, very honored and privileged to be a guest on your webinar. I will have to excuse myself in advance. I've just got 2 days out of isolation from COVID-19, and I have post-COVID symptoms. So I'm going to be a bit slow, which is not very characteristic for me.
It's okay. We rescheduled this webinar just because you got sick 2 weeks ago, so we have a chance to talk to you today. Just please tell us how you got to cannabis industry.
I do not work in the cannabis industry. I'm a part of an NGO called Bilka, which is herb in Macedonian, that works on the field of cannabis legalization. So we are not part of as Bilka, we are not part of the cannabis industry. I do co-work with 2 firms as a part of my attorney at law practice. But as Bilka, of course, we have cooperation with the cannabis industry, but we're not strictly a part of the cannabis industry. If by cannabis industry we mean the legal entities that grow cannabis.
Okay, so let's start with hemp. Hemp in Macedonia isn't legal. The law is, as you call it, is very bad. Please tell us, do you think any idea why is that happening in Macedonia? And is there any potential to develop this market? And if Macedonia is kind of a potential partner to export our products, can you buy cannabis products, hemp products, or it's only illegal to grow it?
At the moment, not legal to grow it, not legal to sell it. This is because when medical cannabis was legalized in 2016, and by the way, Macedonia was only the second, I believe, country after Croatia in Europe to legalize cannabis, growing of medical cannabis. The law was, with political influence, the law was constructed in a way to favor a certain pharmacological industry. Or a very specific legal entity. I will not, of course, mention by name. And the law was constructed in a very, very bad way, which still persists to this day, and it totally excludes hemp. This is, of course, because our politicians have no clue what hemp is. The vast area that it can be it can be used. It can be used. I'm sorry. It can be used. But I have to remind you that the Yugoslavian Federation, in which Macedonia was a part of until 1991, up until the end of the 60s, had a vast hemp industry, and it was a hemp exporter. Of course, with the Single Convention Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs of 1961 and the Protocol 72, all of this came to a halt. Now, in October 2019, November 2019, there were amendments. Amendments to the law of the control of narcotic drug and psychotropic substances that were in the parliament that included hemp. That it would become available to grow, use, etc. But these amendments also had some scandalous amendments or points or paragraphs. I can briefly name them. One of them was a requestment of 1 million euros guarantee per legal entity if you want to obtain a license, which is very unorthodox for this type of business. The money guarantee are usually in Macedonia at least required for banks, casinos, such financial institutions, to be a guarantee that if something went wrong, the people will be paid. It is very unorthodox to require 1 million euros of, in a way, 1 million euros. By the way, 1 million euros is a staggering amount of money in Macedonia because the average pay is 400 euros. You have to understand this. So 1 million euros is a very, very, it's a staggering amount of money. But after protests from Bilka and several other activists, this was reduced to first 500,000 euros, then 300,000 euros. We demand to be deleted altogether, but the ruling parties won't succumb to this. It is not Bilka's, my personal opinion that this is done because political factor is heavily involved in the cannabis business. So this is my perception that they want to eliminate the competition. That does not have political strength. Another scandalous amendment was that, and this was abused. Our noble idea was abused because out of 65 entities, out of 65 entities, 5 years on in Macedonia, you can find products only from 3 entities. All of the others are export oriented, even though they do not export, which is a separate problem. Which leads us to the question: so, what do we as citizens get from cannabis legalization? We cannot say that we have cannabis legalization, medical cannabis legalization in Macedonia, if there are tomorrow 100 legal entities who all export and there are no products for Macedonian citizens. So it's meaningless. So we proposed that the legal entities should be in a sort of way blackmailed, not exactly blackmailed, but conditioned to place products on the market in the span of 18 to 24 months after getting the license. This was abused by the political factor. So they put it on paper. It was like 20% after taxation from the legal entity should go to a separate fund for procurement of rare diseases. With all due respect for those people who suffer from rare diseases, the meaning of medical cannabis legalization is to provide legal cannabis for patients. If you understand my point. Then the third most scandalous amendment was that let's say if me and you, Natalia, have, I don't know, 50-50 legal entity for medical cannabis growth, and if you want to sell your part or your percentage to me or to anybody else, or we both want to sell the firm, we need to get permission by the government to do so, which is a bit of communist practice. Not only communist practice, but is also unconstitutional in Macedonia, as by the new constitution following pluralism in 91, private ownership is guaranteed, and on the law of ownership, Article 8 it is guaranteed that you can freely access. You can use your ownership as you feel like, as long as it is within the law. These are very scandalous amendments that, on the good side, include hemp. That's the good part of the story.
Okay, to sum up, in Macedonia, medical marijuana is legalized from 2016 under 0.2% THC. You don't need any prescription. Over this, you need a prescription. How hard? Okay, so from the patient's point of view, how hard it is to get the prescription? Is the list of diseases very limited, or how hard is it to get it?
First of all, this is also the other moronic aspect of the law, because let me tell you this: when the law was introduced in 2016 March, it was announced in November that it will be legalized by a very conservative ruling, nationalistic, semi-nationalistic ruling party, which by then strongly opposed cannabis legalization. But in the context, I have to give a little context for the audience that there was an ongoing, a year-long ongoing political crisis in which the then ruling conservative party was under attack. So I believe that this was one of the ways to attract voters, new voters, a new spectrum of voters. And I was a part of the public hearing, public debate, which was held in December 2015 on the law, or on the law in December 2015. But the paradox was that no one until then has ever saw the law or what it proposed, the proposed legal issue or solution. And we discussed. So I reacted that it is very paradoxical that we are talking about something that we haven't seen. And when the law was introduced, with the law, a rule book by the Minister of Health, Department was issued, which is still in force today. It hasn't been amended, which is a disgrace. And this gives you a very clear image of how the state of Macedonia does not give a fuck for the patients, because it covers only 4 areas: HIV, cancer, multiple sclerosis, and epilepsy for children. This hasn't been an amendment in 5 years. It's our proposals over and over that this should be reviewed once a year, because you know that science goes. Let's say you cannot use cannabis for pain, which is very, very unorthodox. We held a medical cannabis conference in March 2018, in which a panelist was the then head of the pain clinic in Macedonia, the state pain clinic, who presented several researches from abroad, which clearly stated, and this is a notorious fact, that cannabis helps for pain. And he advocates for including the pain as a state where you can use cannabis. And he says that I want to give my patients cannabis for treatment of pain, but I cannot because of the legal restraints. Also, another idiotic part from the rule book is that only doctors from the public, because I don't know how is it in Poland, in post-communist countries, still there's a public health department, a very big public health department. So only doctors from the public health department can issue a recipe for cannabis, which is pretty idiotic. So a doctor from a private health clinic can operate can do an open heart surgery, but cannot prescribe cannabis. Do you understand my point? And the paradox. So and it is you need to have from your own doctor, from the family doctor, and prescription from the specialist. I have to tell you that very, very, very few of the patients are using the legal cannabis products. There are up until now there are some new products from Pharmacan who working. I also believe they cooperate in Poland. I don't know if you've heard of them. Which are now they have 25-30% THC. Up until then, the biggest was 10%, I believe. It is not with the required quality, so people are still heavily relying on the black market. What the country did, what our country did with this bad law, is that it just the secondary objective is to kill the black market. Because let's face it, unless you do it your own, you really don't know what the chemistry is inside. What do you have inside the oil? Even if you do it on your own, you really cannot be 100% sure because of the quality of the cannabis. So in this part, it didn't just it didn't kill the cannabis, the black market. It exploded because on one part, the state acknowledges the benefits of the cannabis oil. On the other part, it does not give you quality product, so the black market just grows.
You were referring to the fact that 20% of the income from medical marijuana is devoted to some funds to treat some diseases, and also I heard, yeah. So also I heard,
not including cannabis patients.
But also I heard is that the doctors in Macedonia, they are not very willing to prescribe it. Do you think it's because they are afraid of the consequences, or they are lacking the education? And referring to this 20% budget, do you think it is there, or there should be? Basically, the main question is if there should be any budget for these pharmaceutical companies that they have to devote to medical research, because it's still not enough of this data we have.
For medical research, maybe our proposition was to for them to be conditioned to have products on the market. Some percent, 2%, 3%, which they can, because 20% after all the taxes is a very, very high percentage. On the other part of the question was about I'm sorry. You're muted.
Sorry, the question was about the doctors, if they're afraid of the consequences, or basically they're lacking education and they don't know that it's actually helping people.
Look, for 80 years, cannabis has been stigmatized, has been labeled as a heavy drug, the devil's lettuce, I don't know what else. So it is for me, it is not unusual for doctors to resist this, because they are educated in a very different system. The communist system heavily targeted drugs. Up until 1985, there was no drugs, basically, especially in Macedonia. So they are educated in a very big system. And the second part of the blame is what you said, the lack of education, because medical cannabis legalization came overnight without proper education for doctors. Our dear friend, Bilka's dear friend, is Dr. Niko Bekarovski, who was the head of the toxicology clinic, and as the NGO of toxicologists, they were the first doctors to propose cannabis legalization. And his stance was, Janaki, like, it is very normal. None of us, if I give you the books of what I was educated on marijuana or on cannabis in the 70s, that it causes schizophrenia, that it causes you to attack women, and all the bullshit, it is very understandable. So it is to sum this up, two reasons are the most long-term stigmatization of cannabis and lack of proper education for doctors.
Okay, so I know that patients are not allowed to grow medical cannabis in Macedonia. It's only big companies. But how hard it is to get the license to grow medical marijuana? Is it only for a huge pharmaceutical companies that it costs a lot of money, or basically you can be a grower that is an activist and just start a project of growing cannabis in Macedonia, and it's available for anyone who actually tries?
Look, the law does not, state only big pharma, of course, and it cannot, because that would be discriminatory and would be unconstitutional. But the conditions are such that they are so high that it is understandable to open a mid-size factory for cannabis, for medical cannabis, without the laboratory in Macedonia is somewhere between 500,000, somewhere between 500,000. We made an unofficial assumption that is around 900,000 euros, which is again a staggering amount of money in Macedonia. If you want to include a cannabis, if you want to include a laboratory for extraction, it's another 500,000. Only 2 out of the 65 entities have laboratories, of which one is not even a strictly medical cannabis factory. It's a pharmaceutical company that has a branch for medical cannabis. The conditions are as such: you have to have an employment of at least 4 people, which is okay. You have to have 24-hour round security cameras, barbed wire, special ventilation, which is again okay because it's medical cannabis. But these conditions exclude the possibility for small, micro-size, or let's say family-size firms. Another problem which we want to amend, but our power is as an NGO is very, very limited, because we have no political connections. We have cooperations, but not in that sense. Is that we propose? I would like to present now, if you can go to that stage, what are Bilka's propositions for, if that is okay with you, because I can see that we still have plenty of time to go on the part of what are our propositions. Bilka,
I was going to ask you about them, but if you wanna, we can go back to them. I just have a few questions to find out about just the medical marijuana, and I was going to ask
medical
about
marijuana. Look, it is that's the first part. In order to get the license, you need a green light from the Ministry of Health Department, from the Ministry of Agriculture, and then finally the final license is obtained by the government itself. There's a commission, an interdisciplinary commission of several ministries, government, health, agriculture, that actually inspects you. But the lack of knowledge on that part, on that commission, is staggering. These people aren't educated. All of this happened overnight without them having proper education. Let's say cannabis waste. The rule book says that you have to have a separate hole with very specific conditions where you should lay the waste, the waste of cannabis. I have an experience where the commission says that, well, you can throw it anywhere. So it's the lack of education and seriousness of these people is very, very worrisome.
Okay, so please tell us a few words.
I'm sorry. So to sum this up, I'm very sorry to interrupt you. To sum this up, formally no, but de facto only the big business can legally produce cannabis. And to tell you this, even they are not profiting. They are actually in a very, very precarious or very bad position, because I have to give you context that in Macedonia, politics are everywhere. Political parties are everywhere. So let's say now we have a prime minister whose family, cousins have cannabis farms. I was on a panel, if you know this, on the Central European Cannabis Forum in October 2019 with Mr. Leroy. I don't know if he's still an MP in Poland, who told me that it's a very similar case in Poland, that the Ministry of Health cousin are heavily involved. I don't know if this is true. I never checked it out. But in Macedonia, very of the people, businessmen who have political ties, believe that cannabis business is, plant the seeds, grow it, money grow on trees. This is of course not the case. The law is very restrictive, and it does not allow the export of cannabis flower, even if that. So they have very, very big. None of them are making money. They have a lot of stacked up, but even if tomorrow the law is amended and they allow cannabis flower to be exported, they cannot export it in the EU, where they can get the best price, because only two companies in Macedonia have EU GMP standards.
Oh, okay. So just please tell us a little bit about the oils, because that's something, most of what you've been saying is a little less what we got, because the list of diseases isn't limited at all in Poland. You can get, it's not, we don't have any national grow ups, so that's the worst thing. Please tell me a little bit about the oils, because you said that Macedonia is exporting some concentrates, even the high percentage of THC. How this market is working? What's the potential of this market to export to other European countries?
There are only three companies in Macedonia that produce oil. One of them is Replec. It's a strictly pharmaceutical company with a branch. I'm sorry. The first products that they placed on the market were an absolute disaster. But now they are kind of improving, having 15. I don't know if they place 20% THC. In Macedonia, there is no limitation of THC, even though the firstly proposed law had a 2% limitation, for which we protested, and it was not a part of the final solution, of the final law. Final solution is a very very bad choice of words on the final law itself. Another one is Freiher, which they do not grow it here, they import it, then they make it here, so they kind of make amendments here, so they place it on up. It's a CBD oil. In my experience and what I have from people, it's pretty good. And the last to include are Pharmacan, which were the first to include 25 and 30% THC oil, which for us is the best. But I don't want to be wrongly understood that I am marketing them. But yet again, this is a very small part of the 65 licensed and 10 pending medical cannabis licenses for legal entities in Macedonia.
Okay, so please tell us about those 9 demands for cannabis, because they include both hemp and cannabis and hemp and medical marijuana. So please tell us about those demands, about the vision, how you see it should look like, the first step.
I again have to give you an context. With regarding because we are talking about all the time, half an hour about medical cannabis, I would like to spend some time for recreational cannabis. In Macedonia, the situation for recreational cannabis is dire. Up until 2009, the famous Article 215, which included felonies for drugs, because our country does not separate cannabis, heroin, cocaine. It's all the same. They I don't know how is it in Poland. It's penalized the same in Macedonia. It's up to the judge if he will make a discretion, which he probably will, but legally it's the same. So up until 2009, the possible sentence for Article 2015, which includes sale, intent to sale, transportation, holding for sale, intermediation, and etc., was 1 to 10 years. A lot of the judges were human people, and they used to issue a lot of probations, not jail sentence, a lot of probation, especially for cannabis sales. And in order to fight this, the then Ministry of Justice made amendments by which now it's 3 to 10 years. In Macedonia, in order to get a conditional sentence or probation, you can do this. You can get this if you have maximum of 2 years of jail, so that can be commuted to probation. So you get the point. It's 2 years for probation. The minimum sentence is 3 years. After this, there's this legal institute that says that this can be reduced. This can be reduced to 1 year, so it can, or 2 years, so it can be commuted. So I'm just sorry. and this institute is called an emergency mitigation of the sentence. But the emergency mitigation of the sentence is conditioned by having extraordinary conditions. Let's say, I don't know, a sick child that you have to look after, a sick parents, and etc. What our judges are doing, they are conditioning this with your admission of guilt. If you want to go below 3 years, you have to admit that you are guilty. So let's say that you are. But also in 2009, there were amendments to Article 215, by which a new paragraph was introduced, and this was very noble in order to have lighter punishments for small amounts. But what this created was a legal vacuum, because the law itself did not explain, or no rule book to explain what are smaller amounts. So this was abused by the Republican Public Prosecutor Office, which issued a rule book by which regarding cannabis, up to 5 grams is considered to be a smaller amount. Everything above five amounts will get you charges with intent to sale. So if, let's say, me and you go on a weekend and we have 5 grams of cannabis, if searched and stopped by the police, we shall be indicted for intent to sell with not so naive sentence of 3 to 10 years. And by up until this point, it's okay, because the public prosecutor office has the right to issue mandatory rule books for its subordinates. But the problem occurs when the judges are accepting this. This is also in a very broad context. It's also a communist legacy in the communist system. The public prosecutor and the courts were all the same. This is it's improved over the years, but not to the satisfactory level. So the judges are all accepting this, and I am very protesting about this on legal seminars, and the judges are like, well, in what verdict explanation have you seen that we quote the public prosecutor's rule book? Well, in none, and you are not allowed to. But if you see if you see like 1,000 verdicts, you can very easily conclude that there is a strong pattern that they use. So this brings us to our demands, which are an immediate cannabis decriminalization with amendments to the law on control of drugs and psychotropic substances and the penal code, with a legal determination of what grounds, is a personal usage for cannabis, how many grams, and this is also problematic because it should be individualized. I can have 200 grams, which is not a small amount, let's be very clear, but if I don't have intent to sell, I shouldn't be tried for 215. But it is still a far better condition a far better situation that we have now. We also are requiring for the deletion of the legal evidence for tried people under this intent to sale for 5, 6, 10 grams, because anywhere in the world and in Macedonia, or in most parts of the world, if you want to get a serious job, they want you to have a paper that you haven't been convicted. So now I can, for cannabis usage, for my own personal usage, I can be convicted, so I can lose, or I cannot get a good job, or I cannot progress in my job, which is a serious problem. Legalization of cannabis, which is analog to cannabis decriminalization. The allowance to grow up to 10 cannabis plants for people who have medical conditions that is recognized by the states, and up to 3 cannabis plants per household. This is all per household for a recreational user, by which we have no problem to be controlled by the state or some state agency. For the, if you have 10 plants and you're registered for 3, you're still liable for those, for criminal prosecution for those 7 plants that are surpassing the limit. An immediate amendment to the rule book of the Ministry of Health, with expanding of the states where you can or the conditions that you can use cannabis, which is 4 still. In Germany is almost 30. In America is almost 100. I don't know how many are in Poland. And the equalization between public and private health doctors. This is very idiotic and should be amended immediately. It for us is very, very paradoxical situation. The implementation of a condition, the amendment of law to implement a condition for any legal cannabis entity, if they want to keep their license to place cannabis products for the Macedonian market within the time frame of 18 to 24 months after obtaining the license, which for us is enough time to place products on the market, because it, as I said, is meaningless to have 70 legal entities and no or very, very few cannabis products on the market. We demand, because it has a lot of parameters. We demand that it has. We demand a new law, lex specialis law, lex cannabis, which will incorporate a number of areas that are for cannabis patients and recreational users. A separate cannabis agency, an agency for cannabis, which should be. Which CEO or director should be from the cannabis activists. This is very hard to expect, because it will be a lot of money involved. The political parties or the political factors, I really doubt that they will allow it. But this is our demand. Not to forget the foundation of cannabis institutes within the agricultural faculty in Macedonia. Which requires amendments of the law on higher education. Look, we were contacted by, 3 years ago, we were contacted by 2 professors of this faculty, which had this idea that Bilka and the faculty together should found the institute. Why the agricultural faculty? Because they have a laboratory and they have their own land where they can grow. All of this has come, even it's a very noble idea. Why should, because we can produce our own teachers, and we can use this to generate income via students from Macedonia or abroad. This has all come to deaf ears on the political factors. They don't even consider this as an option. And at last, amendments to the law on the control of drugs and psychotropic substances to include hemp in the law, which is one of the few good things that they are willing to do.
Okay, so this is the demands that you think they are quite possible to achieve. So but they still kind of sound like a first step, because it's a limited amount of the plants, limited amount of the flowers, everything is quite limited. So it's not a free prohibition, free decriminalization, free end of prohibition. Sorry?
You cannot expect, it is very hard to expect that you will be allowed to have 100 plants. 100 plants are not, let's be honest here, 100 plants are not meant to satisfy your own needs or your family needs. Bless you. Bless you again.
Spring.
To satisfy your own needs. That's why we believe that 10 plants are satisfactory.
Of course, but the question is, I know that all these demands, then they sound like a first step. So the question is, what do you think is the final step? Do you think that decriminalization is a step to legalization, or maybe, as Mark Emery said, decriminalization is what it is? They have legalization, and he's saying in Canada, I mean, they have legalization. They say, you don't want that. Decriminalization is enough. So maybe we should learn from their experience. Do you think? What do you think is the goal?
I am talking in a very, very specific context in the Republic of Macedonia. Immediate decriminalization in order to stop the persecution of cannabis patients and recreational users. In my legal practice, I have very dire examples. Let's say a patient with epilepsy buys 300 grams of cannabis in order to make oil for himself. You know that the ratio is averagely 10 to 1. Out of 300 grams, at best, he will get 30 grams of 30 cubics of cannabis oil. He gets raided by the police, gets arrested by the police. The police has a scale that they obtained from his mother. They tested it; does not has cannabis substance. So he did not sell it. It was his mother's scale. It was in a single bag. So he gets tried under 215. The basic criminal court in Skopje had an understanding, gave him a probation. The public prosecutor appealed that probation, so he got a year in jail by the higher court in Skopje. I could not live with this, so I demanded the president to just a second to give him amnesty, to pardon him, which he did, which is the first amnesty for drugs in the past 11 years. I'm not bragging myself, I'm giving you facts, which is the first amnesty for drugs in 11 years, 12 years in Macedonia, because the previous president, which was in 2 mandates, 10 years, had this very, very hard, did not give a single pardon in 10 years for cannabis. I have another client of mine, I'm sorry, which was came to me, was arrested with 10 grams of cannabis. He already was tried 2 times, also on the 2 occasions for 2 grams of cannabis. First time, he was for probation. The second time, he was again probated. Public prosecutor, I did not represent him in those 2 cases. Public prosecutor appealed. Higher court gave him a year jail. In jail, he got hooked up on heroin. Did the year, got outside, struggled with heroin addiction. Got himself clear. Gets arrested with 10 grams of cannabis in the basic court in Veles. I pleaded with the judge, had an understanding. I had an expert opinion that says that his addiction of heavier drugs gets him to use lighter drugs in order to not to use harder drugs. The judge had an understanding, gave him probation. Public prosecutor appealed, got 2 years in jail for 10 grams of cannabis. So these are very, very dark examples of the Macedonian judiciary system regarding cannabis. So it's a pattern. They don't see the specific of the case. They say, oh well, it's his 3rd case, so he has to go in jail.
Okay, I understand. So this is a lot to work on, but I'd like to focus a little bit on the future. You said that I'd like to refer to the fact that Macedonia is exporting cannabis oil, which is something basically unusual in Europe. This is not something seen very often. So what do you think this kind of market should be developing? Which direction should it be? I mean, should the cooperation between European countries, be tight? Should we be exporting and importing a lot of cannabis products around the European countries, or basically what Macedonia is doing is just giving a product to the local market? And
Macedonia is not part of the EU. Macedonia is not part of the EU, so
I mean the European market, but not European Union market. European market,
yeah,
just
but
around
European Union is like 80% of the European market. You understand me? If we exclude Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, part of the Balkans, and not all of the Balkans, Macedonia, Albania, and Serbia are not part of the whole of the other Balkans countries are part of the EU. So to exclude the EU is not possible. And as I said, they have very high EU GMP standards, who cost a lot of money that our cannabis legal entities are not really willing to succumb to. So I don't know what their plans are. Even if tomorrow it's allowed to export, they can export only in Albania, Kosovo, which is a semi-state still, and Israel, which has has a very from 1992. Medical cannabis is legalized in there, so they really don't have any need of our cannabis. So I really don't know what their plans are. If they don't update themselves to EU GMP standards, it is impossible. Pharmacan has a EU GMP standard, so they are, I believe, they are on the Polish market, they are on the German market. So it's a very positive example of how to work with legal medical cannabis.
As you mentioned, Ukraine, Russia, and some other countries are also not part of European Union, but they are part of Europe, and as well as Ukraine is producing many industrial products and exporting them to other European countries, they are still a part of the market. So how do you see Macedonia as a part of the European market, and what countries should be cooperating with Macedonia on the level of selling the products and cannabis products, not just flowers, as you said, but the processed cannabis products?
Yes, but you're disregarding the fact that they can sell it for a substantially higher price in Germany than in Ukraine. So the basic business logic is to sell for more, not for less. So any businessman in Macedonia would choose Germany or France or I don't know any other state in the EU over the Eastern European states like. I haven't heard in my experience of 5 years that anybody works with these countries. Anybody in Macedonia works with, or anybody tends to export in Russia. They're all targeting primarily Germany because I believe up until now Germany does not have its own production, which will not last forever. They will come to senses. They will say, well, we are importing this stuff. Why shouldn't we grow it ourselves? But it's a huge market. It's 80 million people, very, very big market. Poland is also a big market. I don't know. I believe that you do not grow. It's not allowed for legal.
No, we import all the medical marijuana in Poland is coming from abroad.
It's a big market. I believe you are 40 million people. So combine these two countries of Germany and Poland, it's 130 million people. So by which you can get a very, very fair price or a good price. So it's a basic business logic.
Well, Poland don't have any access to any proceed cannabis. We only have flowers, and there is only 3 strains of flowers that have a high potency of THC in the pharmacies. But we don't have any. Polish pharmacopoeia doesn't include any prescription, any recipe for cannabis oil for any kind of proceed cannabis products. So this is what we have, but the list of diseases is not limited at all. Every doctor can prescribe medical marijuana, so this market is pretty much open. So the access for the patients is very easy, but it's not very easy to get the license to grow it. So I wanted to, because you're still focusing about with your answers, you're still focusing on how it is and that the situation isn't good, which we know it's not good. We're trying to change that. What I'm trying to get, what kind of answer I'm trying to get from it is how it should be. So who should be growing if patients, if everyone, just a recreational grower, users should be allowed to grow cannabis, or should it be more standardized and you still should be should be forced to get some kind of a license and have it somehow standardized and controlled?
I mentioned this in presenting our demands that recreational cannabis users should be allowed by household to grow up to 3 plants. But on the part of the should they get a license or not? Well, you have to understand that all of the countries, almost everywhere, if we exclude Uruguay, are still obliged by the Single Convention of Narcotic Drugs, which is 80 years old now, and you cannot just say, well, okay, go grow freely, because you would be violating this convention. So we are willing to succumb ourselves to state regulation, license, but in the recreational part, it should be very, very pale. because you understand. Okay, I can understand for the medical cannabis that it should have a separate ventilation, separate, very separate, very specific conditions, because you tend to give this to people who are fragile. But in the recreational cannabis use, you have to understand. When I was a kid, which is back in the late 90s, early 2000, when I started smoking cannabis in year 2000. The black market was 50-50. 50% was homemade domicile Macedonian cannabis, which was with very light green color, not so strong, but very, we call it laughable. And the other 50% was what we call an Albanian cannabis, which came mostly from Albania, but the rubbish, because the very high grade, good Albanian cannabis they exported in EU countries, and they gave us this dark brown, sometimes black color of cannabis, which has no smell or smells like chemistry. And over the time, this cannabis flooded the market. Our cannabis, the domicile cannabis kind of got out of the picture. Now, with in the past 10, 15 years, you can get cannabis strains from abroad, which is good, but they are far more expensive. On the issue of how it should be, look, any country that is a signatory of the Single Convention of Narcotic Drugs, including Macedonia, can propose amendments to the convention. Let's say Macedonia proposes amendments that cannabis should be excluded, or the restriction should be less for cannabis in Macedonia. The procedure is that the Secretary General of the United Nations will give this proposition to all the signatory countries, which should in 18 months should have a stance whether they are for or they are against this amendments. If no country objects, and it's a lot of countries, like 180, 90 countries, no country objects, these amendments will see the light of the day. If one country objects, then it should go on the preparation of a new convention, or on under the patronage of the General Assembly. So it should go on a new General Assembly in preparation of amendments. So it's a very complicated process, and a small country as Macedonia has a very limited political influence. Even the big countries do not have this question as a priority. You know that, and this, of course, is partly because of the heavy influence of the pharmaceutical industry. This is no conspiracy theory. It's a fact that they are still heavily financing the cannabis opposition. This is how it should be on international level. In Macedonia regards, amendments should be made to legalize cannabis for personal use and for medical use. Amendments should be made to, and now our Prime Minister, I forgot to mention this, our Prime Minister, who is a liberal on this question, had this proposal for coffee shops in Macedonia. Or no, his proposal was for coffee shop in touristical places, several cities in Macedonia, to have coffee shop when you can legally smoke cannabis. But here is the problem. Based on the medical cannabis experience, I can assume that also these political factors will grab the business. And what bugs me really is what they all the time they talk about cannabis. They talk about the economic benefits of cannabis legalization. I was on TV with the Ministry of Health Department and another attorney, and all the Ministry of the Health Department ever talked was new workplaces, a higher budget, money for rare issues. And I protested this, saying that this is first of all, it's not his it's not his department to talk about. And second of all, yes, economic benefits are welcome, but they should always be secondary. Cannabis legalization is about, or at least medical cannabis legalization is about supplying the patients with legal high-grade cannabis, and recreational cannabis legalization is about destigmatization, decriminalization of cannabis users and allowing them to legally grow cannabis. And the issue with coffee shops is that it's false that it will produce I don't know how many new workplaces, because some of it might even produce none, because the eventual coffees in Macedonia will just go to be coffee shops, so it cannot include any new workplaces, or very few, but it will make a lot of money for a lot of people. So if you want to talk about the future, our view of the future is amendments to the law that will allow me to grow something that someone else is able to grow in the hundreds of thousands. It is very unacceptable for us in Bilka that some businessmen with strong political ties can have an unlimited number of plants, because the law has no limit, and I am a criminal with mere 3 grams of cannabis. It is, of course, amendments should be made, and flower should be allowed to be exported, because we have no problem with this, but something must be done for the Macedonian citizens and patients, because under Article 2 of the Constitution, the sovereignty comes from its citizens. If you wanted me to be more specific, you can ask me more specific questions.
What was the percentage of those THC? You said there were basically 2 groups of cannabis flowers. You said one was not very strong, but there was a local kind of growing, and you said the other one was dark and not very good looking. So please tell me, what was the difference in percentage of THC in those flowers?
Well, we don't know. We really don't know. It's a black market. You cannot, check this up. What was the percentage of THC? Do you understand me? You buy it from the black market. The dealer does not, stamp this. Okay, so this is that percentage. So we really don't know. And this is one of the dangers of the black market. You really don't know what to consume. The Albanian cannabis is very, very often sprayed with chemicals. So when you get this dizziness, it does not come from the cannabis; it comes from the chemicals. They use I don't know, laces spray and stuff, and they spray it while they grow, and it's very cheap, very low quality, and luckily in the last 5-7 years we have access to high grade cannabis that comes from abroad, and some people are growing it here illegally, of course.
Okay, well, we are basically reaching the time of what we agreed to talk on. You said you need to recover from your.
I kind of get tired more easily, so I'm very, very sorry. I can, in a normal condition, I can go for 3 hours, no problem. But I really would like to apologize to you and all the viewers that we didn't go to the distance.
Okay, thank you very much for this conversation. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us and about.
Thank you very much, Natalia, for the invitation. I will in the near future, just to recover in the month of May, I will contact you, because I have this idea to make a panel discussion for cannabis activists from a lot of countries, including our Serbian counterparts are very active. I don't know if you heard of IRCA initiative. They're very active. The Bosnians are very active. We are using in Macedonia, I just have to say this, we're using this sentence that comes from the Bosnian activists, which in Macedonia is, or let's use it in Bosnian language. It says bolje ilegalno živ nego li legalno mrtav, or in Macedonia it would be podobro ilegalno živ otkoliko legalno mrtav. In English, that means it's better to be illegally alive than legally dead.
Okay. Thank you for this summary. Thank you again for your time.
Okay, we will continue our cooperation. Thank you.
Dziękuję wszystkim, którzy oglądali również dzisiejszy webinar. Ja bym chciała Was jeszcze raz zgromadzić na patelni warszawskiej, czyli przy metrze Centrum. Będę tam mniej więcej za godzinkę zbierać podpisy pod projektem ustawy wolnych konopi pod rejestracją komitetu, dlatego zapraszam Was na zbiórkę podpisów w Warszawie, godzina 14. A jeszcze w 2 słowach, pod czym zbieramy podpisy. Jest to inicjatywa 100 000 podpisów prowadzone przez wolne konopie. Dlaczego 100 000 podpisów? Takie są wymogi inicjatywy ustawodawczej w Polsce. 5 podmiotów przysługuje możliwość, że tak powiem, wręcz zmuszenia Sejmu do podjęcia dyskusji na określony temat i głosowania nad ustawą. Oprócz tego, że posłowie w 4.2.0, czyli 20 kwietnia złożyli swoje projekty ustaw, my jako Wolne Konopie proponujemy troszeczkę inne postulaty. Koncentrujemy się tym razem na tej rekreacyjnej marihuanie. Nie są to postulaty dotyczące medycznej ani przemysłowych konopi, tak jak złożyli to również posłowie. My postulujemy 30 gramów, 4 krzaki oraz 200 gramów w domu. Są to ilości, które pozwalają osobom, które stosują marihuanę na własny użytek, na poczucie się bezpiecznym w stosowaniu swojego drug of choice, że tak powiem. Dlatego zbieramy te podpisy. Według nas propozycja poselska jest troszeczkę za mała, a artykuł 62a, który w tym momencie pozwala na posiadanie niewielkiej ilości na własny użytek, mimo tego, że jest interpretowany w wielu miejscach na niekorzyść użytkowników, są też przypadki, w których ta niewielka ilość jest określana na poziomie większym niż 5 gramów proponowanych przez posłów, dlatego te 5 gramów może okazać się tak naprawdę troszeczkę krokiem do tyłu, jeśli chodzi o to, o co walczymy. Dlatego zapraszam wszystkich do złożenia podpisu. Jeśli nie jesteś z Warszawy, bądź nie jesteś w stanie do nas dotrzeć, tutaj jest link, do którego Was zapraszam. Tam macie wszystko. Macie listę poparcia, którą możecie wydrukować i nam odesłać na wskazany również w tym linku adres, dlatego zachęcam wszystkich do angażowania się w zbiórkę podpisów. W tym momencie kończymy zbiórkę tego pierwszego 1000, który jest na rejestrację komitetu. W momencie, kiedy to będzie złożone, będziemy zbierać te 100 000 podpisów, na to będzie niewiele czasu, dlatego zachęcamy Was już do angażowania się w to jak najbardziej. Dziękuję wszystkim, którzy wzięli udział w dzisiejszym webinarze. Ja się już powoli zbieram, mam przygotowany zestaw do zbiórki podpisów. Nie martwcie się o swoje dane, my ich nie przetwarzamy, nie będzie widać, kto już się wpisał. Następnie wysyłamy do siedziby i lądują one w Sejmie w pudełkach, dlatego możecie być spokojni o bezpieczeństwo tych danych. Jeśli wyślecie, wsadzicie do koperty, zakleicie, wrzucicie do skrzynki, dotrze do naszej siedziby. Również dzisiejsze dane zostaną zaklejone w kopercie i odsłane w to samo miejsce. Dlatego jeszcze raz dziękuję wszystkim za dzisiejszy webinar i do zobaczenia w centrum.